Hi everybody, it's me, the Fetch, host of Inside the Eye Live. Before the Sunday mainstream media political pundit talk shows, there's Inside the Eye Live, where we break down some of the weekly mainstream media talking points before the talking points even get aired. Add in some entertaining stories, weather, cats, intriguing and informative guests, and you get one of the most listened to Saturday morning streaming media political talk shows going today. And it's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, The Fetch, for Inside the Eye Live every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Sasha Lessin, and today on the first hour of our show we have Mike Bara, and the second hour is Russell Brinegar. These are both authors, and Mike is a New York Times Bestselling author, lecturer, and TV personality. He began his writing career after spending more than 25 years as an engineering designer consultant for major aerospace companies, where he was a card-carrying member of the military-industrial complex. A self-described born-again conspiracy theorist, Mike's first book was Dark Mission, The Secret History of NASA, with co-author Richard C. Hoagland. And that was in 2007. His second book, The Choice, which concerns theories about hyperdimensional physics, planetary formation, conscious thought, and how they relate to the Mayan Calendar, Hopi prophecies, and the current era of dramatic change, was published in 2010. In 2012, Mike published Ancient Aliens on the Moon, which was a in-depth study of artificial structures on the moon and its secrets that have been held there for millions of years. In 2013, he returned with Ancient Aliens on Mars, which examines the hidden history of Mars and the vast ancient civilizations which once flourished there. And in 2014, it was Ancient Aliens on Mars 2. In 2015, he published Ancient Aliens and Secret Societies, which reveals the link between fraternal organizations like the Freemasons and the ancient alien presence on Earth. He's been on Coast to Coast AM, Ancient Aliens, over 25 appearances on the History Channel, Uncovering Aliens, and his latest book, published in October 2016, just a couple months ago, is called Hidden Agenda: NASA and the Secret Space Program. And we will focus on that today, and Mike's going to tell us a lot about this. And we have 1 hour with Mike. Sasha, what would you like to say before we bring on Mike?
Okay, this is a real treat, because Mike really looks at all the evidence and is able to sort of discuss the probabilities, but not just stop there. He goes into likelihoods and relative likelihoods with an engineer's eye. So we're going to learn a lot about all kinds of things, like what's really going down. And we're really going to even look at what, if there is a program to keep us down and a program to uplift us that are in competition, what motivates this set of competing programs. We'll get into that.
Welcome, Mike Bara, to the Sacred Matrix.
Hi, how you doing, Janet?
We're doing great. Sasha and I are having a wonderful day in Maui, Hawaii.
Oh,
and it's
yeah,
been
nice.
raining and cold. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. It snowed there, didn't it? It snowed in the mountains, right?
On the top, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the place.
On the Big Islands, they got
Must be,
up to 2 feet.
Must be global warming. So,
Must be. Must be.
Well, there's usually a big hassle at the top of where the telescope is and where it snows, because the native Hawaiians don't like the telescope there, but it's this great big telescope, and there's an ongoing little war there. It's been going for a few years now.
mm-hmm. Interesting.
So what we want to focus on is your newest book, Hidden Agenda, NASA and the Secret Space Program. And could you tell us what is this about? What's the main focus?
Well, for me, it was, I've been, I try to write a book every year, at least one book every year. And for me, what's been coming up at conferences and things I've been attending is that there's a lot of people that are talking about the secret space program and whatever that is. And there's some discussions. There's some people like Richard Dolan who are a little bit more serious about it. And there's other people that are just saying things that just didn't have any backing. There's no documents. There's no proof. They're just stories. And, we've been to Mars and we sent military there and we fought wars with the reptilians and Barack Obama joined me and we teleported out of Redondo Beach. And, and so this stuff has been going for a long time. And these seem to be getting more and more popular with people at different UFO conferences, these stories. And so what I thought about as I read them, it kind of goes against my main, gist or direction. Though I like to only talk about things that I feel like I can put some proof behind them. And, for one thing, the building in Redondo Beach where there supposedly was a teleporter to Mars, I worked in that building and I've been in that building and there's no teleporter there. And as far as I can tell, there never was a teleporter there. So I hear these things and I'm reading these stories and seeing these big crowds and I'm thinking to myself, well, I wonder if there's really anything to this. So what I decided to do was to look into the details that I could scrape together of the possibility that there really was a secret agenda, a hidden agenda, a secret space program that actually was, had been created by the U.S. government, and that there was some sort of secret private technology. Because I'd heard these stories too for years, but of course, to me they were just stories. So as I dug into this, I started to think there was a few bits and pieces here. I found out some new information that I had not been aware of before. And I thought, well, maybe this is a subject to dig into. So I started writing a book and doing more research, and out of it came Hidden Agenda, the new book. So
what's the hidden agenda?
Well, I think what it is, I think my conclusion at the end of the book is that not only was there one secret space program, there were actually two, and they were in competition for a little bit. And John F. Kennedy started the second one. And they ended up, in the end, ultimately, after he was assassinated, they ended up, I think, being kind of pulled back together into one. And I think the agenda has been to copy the technology that we see in flying saucers, to copy extraterrestrial, alien technologies, flying saucers, be able to do the things that they are able to do with sort of defying the laws of physics, traveling faster than light, traveling vast distances in space. These things were on the agenda from the very beginning. How to conquer gravity, how to conquer interstellar travel. And I think that my conclusion is that, there's been kind of a secret space program all along. So,
okay, let me just ask you one basic question. I've been reading Russell Brinegar's stuff. He's saying, like, we consider that we may have been fed false crashes with beings that weren't really people or at all, but just some kind of advanced robots to nudge us along to a technological society run by artificial intelligence. Does your research indicate that as any kind of a logical possibility with any probability of being so?
I can't say so. I can't say that. I mean, it's a possibility that there are, alien intelligences or extraterrestrial intelligences that are artificial, that are simply machines. But the bottom line is that I didn't find any evidence that that's the case, and that wasn't really the kind of thing I was trying to dig into. Those are, I think people get caught up sometimes in these very, very deep second, third, and fourth level questions, and don't really you're not really going to ever answer that. We don't know how old the ruins on Mars are. We really don't know. We can take some guesses. We can do some speculation. But the fact is, I don't think we'll ever know unless we go there and we make contact with who built them and they tell us how old they are. So, that's kind of my conclusion from it. So I think that's while it's a possibility, I don't think that I could reach that conclusion for sure.
What were the two space programs? You said Kennedy has one, and what was the second one, and when did they start?
The second one is really interesting because as I got into this story, I discovered that there was a secret society in Prussia back in the 1800s, the early 1800s, which was called NIMZA, N-Y-M-Z-A, or some people spell it N-J-M-Z-A, and nobody really knows what that acronym stood for. But apparently they were a collection of wealthy Prussian industrialists, pre-Germany, really, that actually were looking into ancient texts like the Mahabharata, or however you pronounce it, and looking at them kind of through physicists' eyes, and they became excited by the possibility of building flying machines. Now, at that time, nothing really flew. I mean, there were a few very, very raw, rudimentary hot air balloons, but at that time they really weren't very able. They weren't able to control them. They really didn't know how they worked. They just kind of put things together. Most people died. Flew in these things. So there was this group that seemed to come forward with this idea, and they were involved with a lot of physicists and scientists from the period in Prussia. And then you see in about the 1830s or 40s, you see that there are these guys emigrating from Prussia to the United States. And one of them, about 1850, was a guy named Charles Delschow. And Delschow actually came from Prussia through New York to Chicago, eventually found his way to Houston, Texas, and then went on to California. And where he apparently went was a place called Sonora, California, which is about 140 miles east of Sacramento. And he spent 10 years there, and at the time he worked for something that's known as the Sonora Air Club from 1850 to 1860. Now, he was an engineer. He was not a scientist, not a theoretical scientist. So his job was to take theoretical ideas and, in fact, create something out of them. In other words, build flying machines. That's what he was supposed to do. And it's really interesting because as you look at that area, California, Nevada, that's where a lot of secret bases are, or semi-secret bases. Edwards Air Force Base is out in this area, in the far west. Area 51 is in Nevada. And the reason that these bases are located is because the far west is pretty much not populated. It's pretty much wide open. And it's a great place for you to be able to build and test things in private with nobody really seeing you. It's much more inhabited than Germany was. So it's really fascinating that he went out there. He formed this thing called the Sonora Air Club, and there is some documentation that supports the fact that it existed. And at one point, one of the guys in the club basically said or made an announcement to the effect that he had discovered a gas with anti-gravity properties, and he called it NB gas. And shortly after that discovery, Delschow returns back to Houston about 1860 after 10 years in California. And when he does, he begins to create these watercolors of these very exotic-looking flying ships. Basically, they are airships, what we would call airships or dirigibles today. At the time, there was nothing like them, and they're very mechanical. And I look at these, and as an engineer, I'm like, okay, what these appear to be to me is they look very much like what you would call production illustration drawings for modern day aircraft. And in the modern era, when we would build jetliners and so forth, we would have what they call production illustrations, which is basically how all the parts on the plane go together. You take a section of the aircraft, you'd illustrate it, and show how it all went together. And it was the same. Struck me as the same thing that Delschow was doing. Now, he made hundreds of these, and everybody's saying, oh, he was an artist. And it's like, no, he wasn't an artist. He was actually an engineer and a draftsman. And so what I think he was doing was depicting craft that he had actually designed and built and worked on. And Then in the 1890s, all of a sudden, after about 30 years of research following the discovery of this NB gas, there starts this massive airship sighting wave in the western United States. And it starts, of all places, in Sacramento. And it kind of makes its way back across the western U.S. through California, Arizona, North Texas. And it basically follows Del Shao's path back through from California back to Houston and on back to Prussia. And what I think happened is that they did make a discovery of some gas or substance which had these anti-gravity properties. It took them 20 or 30 years to build flying machines that actually were able to take advantage of this. And then I think the airship sighting wave of the late 1890s was actually their craft as they were being moved back to Prussia to be developed.
So it's based on the idea of that there was a special fuel. Can you say some more about that?
Well, I mean, what we know about it is simply that this guy claimed to discover it. He claimed that it had anti-gravity properties. The airships, of course, do defy gravity. There's various different methods of doing that. None of the airships that were sighted appeared to have, they weren't like hot air balloons. They didn't have fire heat generators pumping the air up into the balloons. They weren't like that. They were craft that flew on their own. Some of them had propellers, some of them did not. And it's really fascinating because it looks like it was technology that was developed using this NB gas. Now, later on, in Prussia became part of Germany, and it actually specifically was an area known as Silesia. And what actually happened was that was where the Germans later on in World War II were developing their very, very highly advanced super physics technology, like the Nazi bell, which Joseph Farrell has written about on many occasions. So what seemed to happen is that the Germans took this technology back to Germany in about 1900 and continued to work on it and continued to develop it. And it eventually became this substance that was used in the Nazi bell, which is called Zerum 525. Or also it's known as red mercury. So it appears to have some sort of properties that enhance anti-gravity effects when combined with the right materials and counter-rotating magnetic fields and that kind of thing. And that's what the Germans were working on. And I see it as a straight line kind of development of one discovery after another until you get to this Nazi bell, which, I think
does that make sense? Engineering-wise, just having rotating magnets balancing out, creating energy that is free of the cycle. Does that make sense from an engineering perspective?
Well, it can. The problem is that in physics, rotation is a bad word. You're not supposed to do any, experiments in rotation. If you do, you get into a lot of trouble. There was a brilliant scientist named Dr. Bruce De Palma, who's the brother of Brian De Palma, the film director. And he had actually done a ton of work on counter-rotating magnetic fields and large, heavy magnets being spun at very, very high rates of speed. And basically, they kicked him out of MIT for doing that. He was basically not allowed to continue his research because rotation messes up all of the so-called physics equations, the laws of physics that we have today. The Newton's laws of motion are all counter-dependent on rotation. In other words, they exclude rotation. So when you start putting rotation into the equations, everything becomes considerably different. Everything becomes kind of a different world, and it just doesn't seem to add up anymore. So I think what happens is that these guys were working in very edgy, very, very exotic realms of physics that were not commonly acceptable.
So you were telling us about the two space programs. So I lost track. How does this tie in with one of the two space programs?
So
that's what they discovered.
Yeah, these guys were working on this German. The Germans were working on this technology. Hitler, in fact, went out of his way to defend Silesia, the area of Prussia, Germany, that they had these very advanced, highly secret weapons plants at the end of the war, when it would have made a lot more sense to try to defend Berlin. Instead, he sent most of his troops to defend this area. And in fact, after Patton crossed the Rhine in 1945, instead of going straight for the political capital, which would have ended the war, Berlin, his forces were sent directly to this region, Silesia. They were trying to get there before the Russians did and trying to capture this German super secret weapons technology. And what apparently happened is that a few Germans, a guy named Hans Kammler for one, absconded with the Nazi Bell and the plans for that and the plans for the Horton HO-229, a flying wing bomber. He ran off with all this stuff to South America and eventually on to Antarctica. And as the legends go, we went down to Antarctica on Operation High Jump after World War II. We got into a fight with the Germans that were down there in New Swabenland, an area that they had colonized in the 1930s. And according to many rumors and reports, we were met with what were effectively Nazi flying saucers, basically flying saucer technology that was impervious to our weapons, that fired back at us, that destroyed our military equipment and men, and chased us out of Antarctica. And at that point, as the rumor goes, there was apparently some sort of accommodation made where the Germans would give us this technology and we would develop it in return for them basically being set free. We wouldn't chase them anymore. We wouldn't try to hunt them down. So that's kind of the rumor as to how it all went down. And
do you have any evidence of a covenant between representatives of our government and the Hitler government?
No. There's no documentary evidence of that. There is a series of conclusions or speculations that you can make from looking at the events, and I do lay out in the book all these events. But what happened is that technology then, our own military intelligence industry sort of was created in the 1950s, and they immediately set about trying to solve this problem of anti-gravity. There are numerous newspaper articles and advertisements where very, very important aerospace companies after the war were looking for engineers and scientists to work specifically on anti-gravity technology. And this keeps going along from the 1940s, the 50s, until about 1958, when all of a sudden it gets cut off and it's all taken black, and all of the open discussion of anti-gravity in the scientific literature is just absolutely cut off. Now, what I think happened is that the intelligence agencies, the NSA, the CIA, whoever ran that show, and some people think it was, it's Nazi factions that run those intelligence agencies, they basically, took the money and ran. They took the details, they took the plans, they took the technology and ran and made it private. And it appears that even by 1960, that President Kennedy, after his election in 61, was basically locked out of that information. And that's why I think Kennedy then decided to create his own space program, which was the NASA program, to go to the moon and retrieve alien technology, I think, that is on the moon. And the idea was that he was kind of like, oh, well, F you. If you're not going to let me have access to this stuff, I'm going to go to the moon. We're going to retrieve the technology that's there, and we're going to build our own stuff from what we learned there. And I think that was the separate parallel secret space program that NASA was a cover for. That's where it began.
Wow, that makes sense. Yeah.
Are you familiar with the Serpo story that Kennedy was supposed to be behind that? Have you investigated that? Is there any truth to that?
Well, I dug into. Yeah, Janet, I actually dug into Serpo for the purposes of this book, and I do quote quite a bit from the Serpo stuff. And here's the conclusions that I've reached after studying it and seeing it out there for over 10 years now. People claim that Serpo was a hoax, just like they claim that MJ-12 is a hoax, the MJ-12 documents. But the point of a hoax is to, pull off the hoax, and then you come out and you say, oh, no, guess what? I made it all up. I fooled all of you. Look at how smart I am. Look at how clever I am. Give me a job in journalism or something like that. That's what you do. You do not sit on a hoax for 10 years. And if you look at the detail and the volume of information on the serpo.org website, it is so extensive. It is so detailed. It would have taken, let's say, a clever individual literally thousands upon thousands upon thousands of hours to create that, and do it in a way that was as authentic as Serpo is. When I look at that, I say, no, there's no way anybody does this for for a joke. They would only do this if they were either A, telling the truth, putting the real information out there that they were getting leaked from the inside, or if they were disinformationists that were working for powerful government forces trying to throw everybody off the scent of the real stuff. Either way, you've got confirmation that there is an inside, secret agenda regarding this stuff. So my conclusion on Serpo is that it's authentic.
And why are all the world leaders rushing to Antarctica right now? Any insight into that?
Wait, I want to go back to
Wait.
Okay.
Okay.
About the Serpo.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Partly the reason Kennedy forgave von Braun, whose factories in Germany were using slave labor, and let him run the space program, was because he was in competition with Alan Dulles, who had brought the Nazis over and basically given our industry and military to the Nazi clique that's now running America. Could you relate to that a little bit?
Well, there's some people that believe that. I don't really believe that there's a Nazi clique running America. I do see Dulles was part of the MJ-12 CIA connection, which would have been developing their own secret space program technologies, which would have in effect made them almost gods, on Earth at that time in 1961. Mm-hmm. And Kennedy, as a response to that, I think did create this parallel secret space program to go to the moon, retrieve the technology, and reverse engineer it. And that's what NASA is. NASA was a cover for that operation, for that secret operation. Sorry. And so, to my mind, having Dulles and Kennedy, in rivalry with each other makes complete sense in that context, without necessarily having to reach the conclusion that the Nazis are running the world.
Okay, so now we have two agencies competing for budget. The Kennedy Space Agency and the clandestines.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm not sure what the question is here, but Dulles has a certain budget that the CIA and all of the allies in Congress make sure that the intelligence agencies get. What Kennedy did to respond to that and to finance his own plans was he issued currency. He issued silver certificates right out of the Treasury in rivaling the currency that was produced by the Federal Reserve. He printed his own currency, and that's how he financed his operations, because he was constricted by Congress in terms of what he could get passed and money he could get appropriated for his public space programs. But then he turned around and simply issued his own currency, his own certificates, of which I'm sure he and his guys had plenty to spend to be able to finance the operations that they were conducting.
Wow.
So did they continue past the public program to, to Apollo 20 and all those other ones?
Well, I don't know about
out on the internet.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Apollo 20, the whole story, it's out there. I don't know that I'd buy it. I don't see a lot of evidence for it. We do know from the documentation that they did build one more Saturn V, but we know where that one is, and it's in the museums. So we're in a situation where we definitely have proof that they built more than one more Apollo craft than they needed, but ultimately, or than they used. But to me, there's no real proof of Apollo 20, other than the YouTube video, which I don't think is very convincing, to be honest with you.
Okay. And so are you aware that there's a lot of buzz about all these world leaders going to Antarctica? Have you researched that or heard anything about it?
I am always very interested and suspicious of things like that. And I know in fact that John Kerry, Secretary of State, who by the way is, I think in order to become Secretary of State, you have to renounce your U.S. citizenship. There's some evidence that that's the case.
Wow.
Meaning the Secretary of State actually works for a foreign power, not for the United States. And the fact that he went to Antarctica, where these bases are rumored to exist, was, I thought, absolutely fascinating. That he was there on Election Day, and that is an indication to me that there is a war of some kind going on behind the scenes. I certainly think that there's evidence to support that, and I have my own ideas on what that's all about and who's who's doing that. And I think Kerry was there
Okay,
to try to establish justice.
What's your ideas about who's doing that?
Well, I mean, we're in a period of extraordinary upheaval. I mean, just today we had Italy voting to leave the EU, so the European Union is going to collapse. The euro currency is going to collapse. The dollar and the euro are going to kind of even out at some point, and the British pound before this all happens. And, we're going to have a restructuring of our financial system. We're already on a new financial system called Basel III, which I think is really important. It creates a lot more true transparency in the financial world, and it's a lot more difficult to launder money from now on. And so what I think you're seeing is a battle behind the scenes between, good and evil, the people that have the best interests of the banksters, some people call it the cabal, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers that have been running things for quite some time, the Vatican's associated with them. And then you have the good guys, the other people that have been quietly waiting for their time to come and are ready to push the world into a new era of, I think, peace and cooperation. And, definitely Antarctica is where a lot of the bad guys hang out. And I think that, as you see, there's this sort of surge in people wanting autonomy over their own lives and rejecting governments and rejecting governmental autocracies, globalist autocracies that are stationed in other countries. And, Obama's tried very hard to help that. He's tried to turn the internet over to foreign power so that now somebody, in Europe under the Rothschilds' control can dictate to us what can go on the internet. I think Trump is going to reverse all these things. And, I think you're definitely seeing a battle playing out between those who want a new world order or one world government and those who want individual choice and individual autonomy. And I think it's kind of a sovereignty versus a world government, individual sovereignty versus a world government.
It's doesn't have to be an either or thing. You can have local autonomy and still global cooperation on pollution and nuclear testing and things like that.
Yeah, you can have that.
You can have both, yeah.
So what else did you cover in Hidden Agenda? There's a long, description, but I'm sure. What are some of the things that you can reveal to us?
Is it population reduction? That's one of the things that people worry about.
Yeah, are we in this population bomb?
No. First of all, there's no population bomb. That's hippie nonsense from the 60s. That's never going to happen. I mean, I think the planet can easily sustain a lot more people than it has today. I mean, if you look out again, go out west, fly over Montana sometime and tell me that we're overpopulated. There's nobody living there, and there's so much square footage. It's incredible. So, there has been an agenda by the Club of Rome and by some of these George Soros-controlled entities that have wanted to convince people for years and years that, population is going to explode, people are going to die, we're all going to starve to death, we're going to have to eat each other, or Soylent Green, or, eat Soylent Green or something. And none of their predictions have ever come true. None of them, ever, not one. And every 10 years, somebody put a meme out, every 20 years or so, the environmentalists put out, a warning that we only have 10 years left to live or something like that. Or every 5 years they tell us we've only got 10 years left to live. And they've said that repeatedly. It's really interesting. Go back and do a Google and look at the quotes from the original Green Day in 1971. And, they're just laughable. I mean, basically all the same people that are promoting this environmental stuff today were telling us we'd all be dead by the year 2000. There'd be mass starvation and all this stuff. And it's never happened. So, people try to talk about Fukushima as some sort of attempt to depopulate the planet, and I'm saying there are people that definitely have that agenda that would love to see the Earth's population reduced. I'm saying I don't think the fact that we have a large population is really any kind of threat to the planet. I think we're doing just fine, and we can certainly sustain a lot more people than we have today. But there is that agenda out there. But the bottom line is that they've just been 25,000 people died in Fukushima. Okay, that's probably the biggest natural disaster in the last, or not natural disaster in the last 25 or 30 years. Those people were replaced within 2 or 3 days. So if they're trying to depopulate the planet, they're doing a really lousy job of it, is the way I look at it.
The thing that really depopulates more than anything else is these large-scale Napoleonic World War I, World War II, and the disease that accompanies it, and the destruction and suffering of the civilian populations. And these are definite setbacks in population that some people think are being fed upon us on purpose so that the Illuminati can continue their control.
Right, and I mean, well, look at the election we just had in the U.S. I mean, we did just have an election. We can argue about some of the nitpicky details, but the bottom line is, Hillary tried to claim that the Russians were stealing our election, that they were interfering with the U.S. election process. She was trying to start a war with Russia. I mean, she kept going Russia, Russia, Russia. If she had won, we would be going to war with Russia sooner rather than later. And that is definitely an agenda of certain people, you know, certain people and on the evil side of things. They definitely want a war between Russia and the U.S. And, you know, Putin doesn't want that. And I don't think Trump wants that. And I think the people at some conscious or subconscious level maybe don't want it either. And we acted on it by voting in a way that really surprised a lot of people. It didn't surprise me, but it surprised a lot of people. And, you know, you look at there were, as of the year 2000, there were 5 countries that did not have central banks owned by the Rothschilds. Okay? Those 5 countries were Iraq, Libya, Egypt, Russia, and what's the other one? Iran. So you have, and who have we been Syria. And who have we been invading and fighting for the last 15 years?
Those
Iraq,
people. Those
Libya,
countries.
Egypt, Russia, and Syria. And, you know, or at least all of them up to
Right.
Russia. So that's, you know, there are people that want to dig up this whole enmity thing, this whole Cold War thing with the Russians. And it's like Putin, you know, is not owned by these other bankers. And that's why he's so dangerous and so scary to the controllers, the people that want to put us under the boot. And, you know, I just think that what's happening is that worldwide, and I talked about this in my second book, The Choice, I wrote that this was going to happen between 2012 and 2022, 2023, during this period, that there's going to be all kinds of upheaval of our governmental and financial systems. And I think you're starting to see it play out. I mean, I didn't specifically say Donald Trump was going to become president, but I saw somebody like him emerging as a leader of this. So it's going to be really interesting to see. And by the way, I think Trump is a representative of the so-called of the Republican faction. There, you know, there's a battle between the democracy and the republic, and the democracy is what we have, or what we're told we have, which is kind of mob rule, and the republic is ruled by the patricians, I guess. But they're the ones they're the ones I think who've kind of tried to preserve the possibilities of freedom and self-autonomy and sovereignty over the last couple of hundred years, thousands of years, really, while the controllers, the cabal, have tried to push this financial stuff on us. Wow, we're way off target from where I thought we were going to be.
But I love
but it's interesting. It kind of all fits together. It kind of all fits together because I think the intelligence agencies that wanted their super technology, their flying saucers, you know, those guys are all working on the cabal side, and I think Kennedy and Reagan, and perhaps now maybe Mr. Trump, we're going to have to wait and see what he does, are guys that were working for the other side, saying, you know, no, we believe in people. We believe that the people can make their own choices, and that will be better for human evolution rather than having these dark, secret, you know, and let's face it, satanic forces doing, you know, deciding everything for us. And I mean, you know, you look at Pizzagate. There's a lot of really dark, bizarre stuff going on out there with our government, and I think WikiLeaks is not done. I think there's going to continue to be revelations about some of the things that our government's been involved in. And don't get caught up in the Republican Democrat labels. Those are not applicable. What's important to know is that both sides are involved, you know, with this. Anybody can be seduced to the dark side, right? That's the message of Star Wars. Right. And they can start out with a good heart, but be seduced. And I think that I think we're going to see a lot of.
They can also become conscious, even though they're on the outside.
So where could it go? Where could it possibly go where you're having local autonomy, yet a rational and peaceful world. How could that come about? Do you have any vision of how that could happen?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't look. I don't think that the people in the United States are any are necessarily any threat to Russia. I think we have a lot in common culturally. I think we should be working towards those common goals. And so I people think that the only way to stop war is globalism, and I really think that's the path to war, because I think they've been behind most of the wars that have been fought here in the 20th century, at least. So at least since FDR put in the Federal Reserve, I think that all of our wars have been financial. So I mean, again, it's I trust in the ultimate goodness of people. If we basically want to get along with everybody, we can get along with them.
Okay.
Yeah. And NATO basically had, the deal was we won't encroach further on Russia's sphere of influence, and so that Putin had to stand up because the United States broke the deal.
Yeah, and I mean, clearly Putin and Obama are on opposite sides. They do not get along. So if you like Obama, that worries you. If you don't like Obama, that makes you glad. But again, I think it remains to play out who is going to be who, which side is going to win this conflict and which direction we're going to head. But that's what this period of time is all about. That's what 2012 was all about.
Right.
The 2012 is an apocalypse. Apocalypse simply means lifting of a veil, to lift the veil and see what's underneath. And as we're seeing more and more of what's underneath, we're wanting out. We want to get out of the EU. We want to get out of these different organizations and run our own lives. And we don't want somebody in Brussels deciding for us what we can watch on TV or read on the internet. That's not going to be a good thing.
Yeah. So, what we're left with that's critical is that the European nations don't drag the globe into another world war. That was the ultimate purpose or one of the purposes of the Union in the first place. And so we need some way to make sure that doesn't happen, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know how we can assure that, except that we elect the right people to represent us. That's the most important thing from my perspective. So,
I want to take this back. You wrote all these books, 7 books, and you looked at the ruins on Mars and the ruins on the moon. And so, is this the Anunnaki? Who are these people? Are they more ancient cultures? How do these ancient cultures tie in with the modern? Are these the extraterrestrials that are visiting the Earth and influencing our governments and making secret treaties with the Eisenhower and stuff like that?
Yeah, if any of that's true. That's a great question, Janet. You're asking me really the best questions because it goes back to the book. It goes back to what's in Hidden Agenda, NASA and the Secret Space Program. And, one of the things I talk about in there is the whistleblowers. I talk about Philip Corso. I talk about Jesse Marcel. I talk about Robert O. Dean. And one of the things that Bob Dean has told me over the years, who I think, by the way, is a wonderful guy, and if you don't know who Robert O. Dean is, I would say look him up on Google and because he's a wonderful, wonderful man, and I hope he's with us for a lot longer. But one of the things he's told me is what he says in his presentations, and he says, look, extraterrestrials are not in our government. They are the government. And that he says that the Anunnaki, some of them are still here, that they stayed behind, and they've been trying to guide us towards the light, I guess, for the last couple of thousand years during this period of darkness, the age of Pisces, which is thankfully ending now. They've been trying to be a guidance for us towards the right way to do things, and because they're trying to make up for the bad karma of all the mistakes they made when they were here, and all the wars and things that happened. They're trying to teach us a better way. They're trying to make us a better version of mankind than they were. Uh-huh. And so I think that's a distinct possibility. But it's really interesting you brought that up because, like I said, that's right in the book on my whistleblowers chapter. So that's what I think is probably the direction we're headed. And I'm hoping that we can avoid these catastrophic wars. It seems like so far we have, and that's a good thing.
Right. So what about the Stokes?
Sorry, Jen, just
Go
to make
ahead.
one more point.
That's okay.
Even if you look at the wars that have happened, right? We've had wars, but if you go from if you look at World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the first Gulf War, the second Gulf War, the damage that's done by these wars actually is getting to be less and less. The number of people killed, the casualties are getting smaller and smaller, and that indicates to me a general growth towards less war, and less and war with less of an impact. The devastating impact of World War I and World War II has lessened dramatically in the wars we've had since. That doesn't make them acceptable, but it certainly indicates that we're, I think, trending in a better direction with our conflict resolution.
So I was wondering about, I've heard stories from different whistleblowers that the U.S. government especially is being run by the tall whites, which are apparently some kind of Anunnaki human hybrid. And then Snowden came out with his declaration that they're running the government. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think anybody knows for sure. But certainly it's, so far so good. I don't know. I know what people have told me. I know what Bob Dean talks about. I hope that it's true that we're having some help from above. In the book, I talk about people like Hermann Oberth, who was Wernher von Braun's mentor in Nazi Germany and the rocket programs, and said that we had extraterrestrial help in developing rocket technologies. But I can't point to specific pieces of evidence that support that concept.
So how do we determine what is actual proof? Because you could have, 10 people testify about something and it holds up in a court of law. But we're looking at this type of information. It's really hard to determine what is proof and how do we prove things. We have a lot of whistleblowers coming out and they're telling us all these different stories. So how do we find the real truth, the real proof?
Well, okay, I guess it depends on how you define proof. I mean, for me, proof is what is in my own heart and my own mind. And we're very focused these days. We're extremely focused on proof of the mind. In other words, facts and figures and adding all these data points up and coming to this very mechanical conclusion that this is proof of something or this is valid. There are people who think that there are black holes. I personally think that after hundreds of years of observing the stars, we've never observed a black hole. I'm beginning to wonder if they're really out there, and I kind of seriously doubt that they are. I think there's something out there, but I don't think it's what we call a black hole. But you have all these equations. I mean, you can make a wall full of mathematical equations or musical notes, and that doesn't allow you to hear a beautiful melody. So it's a question of what is the truth that we accept. And what I think we're moving towards is more heart truth, more intuitive truth, and less mechanical truth. So what's the proof? What's the truth? I don't know. I look at this stuff, and what I put in the book is to me sufficient evidence in my heart and in my mind to say, yeah, this happened. That there is a secret private program that has anti-gravity technology. In fact, NASA's videotaped some of them on some space shuttle missions. So, it all depends on what your standard is. If your standard is it has to be on CNN or the other fake news networks and talked about on Oprah to be real, if that's your standard, I don't think we're ever going to get there. The question is, what's your standard? What's your standard, and why is that a better standard than your own personal truth? Why is that a better standard than your own personal truth?
Sash.
Well, yeah, I just think about the Italians back in the 50s, 120 people that saw the ships and people from the ships were telling them, we shut down the nuclear facilities here and there just to show that we can do that, to remind you that we're concerned about that. And there's this whole program in Italy with 120 people that came regularly to extraterrestrials who look like Homo sapiens. For me, that seems like evidence.
Well, I mean, yeah, I agree with you to a certain extent, and I mean, I think obviously nuclear fission is probably not the most efficient or the safest way for us to generate power. I mean, right now maybe it is within the world we have, but what I think we've discovered in researching this book is that there are alternative ways to generate energy and to do things. And you need energy to build buildings and make spacecraft and make cars and planes and things like that. And hopefully what I see is us moving more towards that, not towards what they call clean energy, which is stuff like windmills, which kill hundreds of thousands, if not millions of birds. That's a terrible way to generate energy. And solar energy just really doesn't seem to work very well. So, I mean, to me, there are many other methods we could use, but what we're finding is that there's actually significantly more exotic methods of generating energy that can generate the results and the energy that we need to have our society go forward. I mean, I'm personally in favor of air conditioning for everybody. I recently went on a cruise to Honduras and Belize and Mexico in September, and we went through Belize, and it was horribly hot and humid. It was September, so it wasn't even the height of summer. It was probably 90 degrees and 80% humidity. It was just absolutely horrible, and there's literally no air conditioning in this country. And
Wow.
I'm like, God, these poor people. And I thought to myself, if I had a couple $1 trillion, I would come back to this country and I'd wire the whole thing up and I'd start pumping out the air conditioning, because they have rivers. They have these beautiful rivers that they could use for hydroelectric power, which is very, very minimal impact to the environment, and it just, I mean, to me, it's like, I just think that
So hydro,
do.
like dams
Well,
that go sideways along the river instead of blocking it.
yeah, or however it works. I mean, yeah, however you can make it work and make it efficient and economic is great. Is great. I mean, again, you look at California and they have these. You could put desalination plants in there. They had this drought for 2 or 3 or 4 years, and it caused all this economic distress. And I'm like, all you have to do, you're living next to an ocean, just put the desalination plants along the coast. And people are like, well, you lose money on it. It might cost you, you might build it for $7 million, but it might cost you $8 million a year to operate. And I'm like, how far in debt is California? 16 billion,
Right.
30 billion, 60 billion, a few $1 million more for 4 or 5 or 6 of these plants along the coast isn't really that much more debt to go into. You know what I'm saying? To create so that we have constant agricultural production. I mean, the United States can feed the world. Our farmland
Right.
out west could feed the world. And there never would be anybody that would ever have to go without food. And so to me, it's just time to bring these secret technologies more out into the open. And I understand that people are reluctant because it will upset the economic balance, the system that we have, which overall I tend to think is pretty good. I think we should have a system where we strive for more, because that motivates us to not just sit around and smoke weed and do drugs all day. So,
Hey, Mike, wait. What else
lot
besides hydro? What else is good besides hydro?
Well, I think we definitely
Yeah,
need
the
to be doing.
alternative.
I think we definitely need to
Go
be
ahead.
doing more experiments in these other areas that we've talked about. That the Germans. I mean, if we have these rotating magnetic fields, energy through rotation. I mean, literally, there's a lot of stuff out there that appears it could generate energy. I mean, you even look at for instance, at the tethered satellite experiment on the space shuttle mission that caused an energy spike. That was because you can generate energy simply by moving something through space. And there's all kinds of advanced technologies that there's hints of, that there's indications can work, but that aren't being, either they're not being developed or they've been developed privately and kept hidden. I don't know which.
So we're running out of time here, but we have about 4 more minutes. I was looking at your description of your book. You said that in June 8th, 1959, that they set up Project Horizon, which was a base on the moon. So when did all this start? How long have we, the humans, been on the moon and Mars?
Well, I mean, I think there's if what's on the moon is actually Anunnaki technology, then what you can say is that we've been on the moon hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years ago, a long time. And on Mars, we may have actually come from Mars. I mean, the so-called face on Mars is basically a human face. So, as you look into these things, I don't know. If you talk about this specific version of humanity, the Hopi tell us that there have been previous worlds of man that were even more advanced technologically than we are now. And I see no reason to think that they did not go to the moon and leave some of this stuff behind. And that's part of what we're bringing back with the Apollo mission. So, I mean, to me, I just feel that that's an unanswerable question at this point. But maybe someday we're going to get the truth from all these guys.
Look, you got a few minutes. I really love your story about the Apollo fellow who started painting colors all over the moon.
Right.
Could you tell us that story?
Well, yeah. Alan Bean was the fourth man to walk on the surface of the moon. He was on Apollo 12. He was the second mission to the moon in 1969, November of 69. And when he got back, he retired from NASA and began to go into painting. He liked to paint. And he kept painting pictures of himself on the moon, self-portraits, where the moon was all gray and bland and colorless, the way it appears in the National Geographic photos. But in reality, the lunar surface is very bright, it's very colorful, it's very unique and unusual because of light bouncing around from glass structures that I talk about on the moon.
Well, we're out of time, Mike. We'll have to have you back again. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll be back in about 5 minutes.
Mike.
You're listening to The Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio.
Thank you, guys.
Slips.com. Thank you, Mike.
Great.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
If you think for 1 second that the Capitol will ever treat us fairly, you are lying to yourselves. Because we know who they are and what they do. This is what they do, and we must fight back. You can torture us and bomb us. Fire is catching. And if we burn, you burn with us.
Good evening.
Are you awake yet? I hope. We've tried and we've tried for years and years to use passive resistance and loud voices to make a change. That time is over. Your governments around the world have no other goal than to decimate your entire existence at the hands of the bankers and the elites. The war is coming, and it's your choice to decide if you want to be a warrior or a victim. Denial is not a choice anymore. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Cleaning house.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
See how
the trouble you've started.
Join us here on Revolution Radio, Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern on Studio B, for a politician, patriot, social savant, businessman, former investment banker, and Veterans Today columnist, Mike Harris. Listen to Mike as he exposes the corruption, sedition, and terrorism within our own government. He knows our system is flawed and that obstruction of justice is all too commonplace. His show, Short End of the Stick, pokes at this corruption with eloquent style. That's Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Studio B for the Short End of the Stick with the man who should have been elected governor of Arizona, Mike Harris.
That's right here on Revolution Radio.
Enjoy your extra big-ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another extra big-ass fries?
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please come back when you can afford to make a purchase.
No.
I'm sorry you're having
Come
trouble.
on. My kids are starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener-supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What are we doing live? It goes in eternity.
And aloha. Welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin. And this second half, before we get back to what we're doing in the second half, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to that donation button on freedomslip.com and donate what you can. $1, $5, $15, $20, $100, whatever you can donate is greatly appreciated. And we do thank you very much for your donation. And Thomas Becker, are there any specials going on right now?
No, ma'am. We're just begging for money since it's Christmas time, you know.
Please send money. We're begging. We're going to ding our little bells at the store. All right, so do go over and make the donation so we can continue to bring you these shows because it costs money to do so. All right, our second guest is Russell Scott Brinegar.
But let me just finish before we do Russell on. We have to finish the story that Mike was telling us.
Oh, well, okay, real quick.
Okay, so at the end of the last hour before the break, Mike Bara was telling us about this astronaut who, after he retired, started painting. And first he was painting dull lunar surfaces. He was an Apollo astronaut. And then he started painting more and more colors and more and more colors. And pretty soon he remembered what he had been drugged and told not to remember. That the sun was hitting the glass of all these domes all over the lunar surface. And it was making the prismatic effect of color blobs all over the moon. And so that's the completion of Mike Bara's story. Okay, so now we can get back to Russell.
Now, overlords of the singularity, the manipulation of humankind by hidden UFO intelligences, and the quest for transcendence. That is a mouthful. And Russell Scott Brinegar will tell us about this new book, which is Dr. Lesson's been digesting it, absorbing it, and studying it for 2 weeks now, and he has it all marked up with his underlines and and yellow pens and all kinds of stuff. So I'm going to let these guys, because I haven't read it yet, but there's all kinds of directions we can go because it's a very lengthy book. So without further ado, Russell Scott Brinegar, welcome to the Sacred Matrix.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed listening to the hour with Mike Bara. I wish I could be like Spock and do the Vulcan mind melt and just absorb all of his knowledge.
Oh, yeah, he's a major reasoncher. And did you want to say something about Russell's book?
Basically, Russell, you've explored the literature so thoroughly, and what happens for anyone that does that, you've sort of summarized some of this stuff, is you come to the conclusion. It's unescapable that there is some kind of orchestration of what's going down, and that there's like two forces, a force that wants to Borg us in a machine intelligence, and pushes us in that direction by making us suffer by war and violence and greed and economic slavery, and a force that's trying to assist us in not blowing ourselves up, but developing enough technology so that we ascend, so that we have a planet of peace. And that's what I got from your book, Russell, is that you don't know which way it's going to go. Anyway, let's start with that macro theory, because I think that is the hypothesis that best brings in all the data from the paranormal, the past life recollections, the association with spirits and ghosts and angels and history of gods from other planets. Your book brings it all together. There is a plan. We're moving toward a singularity where we'll be one with the machine, and I hope they won't discard us. What do you got to say, Russ?
Okay.
Well, first of all, I really appreciate you taking the time to read that. I really value your opinion. Just to give a little background, I lived 54 years of my life only allowing my mind to contemplate what's considered hard science. Michael Shermer gives a really good breakdown in his book, Skepticism 101, that you've got hard science, the things that are measurable and reproducible, and that was all I cared about. Then you move into pseudoscience, which ufology would probably be categorized as that, because for the most part, it's in the hands of amateurs, because the government and the officialities have decided that, at least their official position is that it's not worth scientifically pursuing. You've got fringe science like Michio Kaku and string theory, and he's way out there in some of his books with the future of the mind and the physics of the impossible. And then mysticism. At the age of 54, my paradigm was shattered. Just to give you a mini synopsis, I had a near-death experience involving a heart attack, and it was a flash experience that allowed me to understand that when you die, when your body dies, that is not the end of existence, that you've got another dimension or another world that you go into. The universe is a lot more than what we know of in this physical world. We're sort of like a blind ant on the tire at Carnival Ride at Disney World, and we don't even know where we're at. And when that veil is dropped, it's mind-blowing that there's so much going on. And then because I didn't actually cross over, the veil shot, and here I am. So I went from a hard science guy to embracing all of these different kinds of sciences that Michael Shermer describes, the hard science, the pseudoscience, the fringe science, the mysticism. I still use the hard science as a core reference point, but I now allow my mind to ponder into these other areas. And one of the things that struck me when I was listening to Michael Bara is the subject of crash flying saucers. because it seems just a little bit too coincidental to me that if these are actual biological entities coming here in mechanical craft that are accidentally crashing in our deserts, that the technology that we glean from them just happens to be understandable by our scientists and maybe just a little bit ahead of where we're already at. So that seems beyond coincidence to me. There are some of my favorite ufologists, like John Keel. I've read everything that he ever wrote, even to his magazine articles. Andrew Colvin's got a lot on audible.com right now. The Outer Limits of the Twilight Zone, Flying Saucer to the Center of Your Mind. There's several collections of John Keel's old magazine writings, which are just treasures. And I've absorbed all of those. But he makes fun of pickled aliens and doesn't believe in the crashed flying saucer thing at all. So there's people that have accepted certain concepts into their reality, and then other people just kind of keep everything in an abeyance to see if the truth will come out someday. But when you've got people like Leonard Stringfield that pretty much devoted years of his life to ascertaining the reality of flying saucer crashes and concluded that there is a core reality to it, I have a tendency to listen to somebody like that dedicated themselves so much. And then you've got people like Colonel Philip Corso, who wrote The Day After Roswell. And you have to ask yourself the question, why would somebody with such an impeccable military career come forward with this types of information if it wasn't true? And the only two possibilities that I can think of is if the flying saucer crashes are fiction, he felt like he was doing his military duty to provide this intentionally perpetuated mythos to hide what the government and the military was actually doing with the technology that they're discovering, or like Mike Barra said, maybe they're bringing it back from the moon or something, or it's true. It's one or the other. So I like pondering, both possibilities, but I do think that it is interesting that even back in the 1800s, you have reports of crash technology and the flying boxcars and the brass cogs where they reported the vehicle crashing with sparks flying off of it, and they retrieved these brass objects, that contributed to the construction of the railroad and the Industrial Revolution, which of course is necessary on the way to a technological singularity. So I'm living proof that you can change your reality and change your consciousness, because I went at the age of 54 from the hard science to all these other branches of science. I had a mystical experience that Shermer would classify as anecdotal evidence or mysticism. To me, it was real, but I know I can't convey this to a hard science person. If they're not allowing their mind to go any farther than the hard science, they're just going to say, well, that was my brain releasing chemicals as I was dying, and it produced a change in the neural structure and gave me this experience. I personally don't buy that, because to me it was very real. So based on a mystical experience in 2009, I embarked on a personal journey into the paranormal and ghosts and everything from Bigfoot to UFOs, and found that it's sort of all tied into a giant meta-phenomena. They all kind of interlink with one another. And I was naively, when I first set out to do this, I didn't have any intention on writing a book. These were just my personal notes to myself. And I thought it was really neat that there was so many reports of UFO encounters all over the world. And my original goal was to have a complete synopsis of them, a complete documentation of every reported sighting that there was in our literature. And you realize that that's impossible, because there's so many of them that the farther you get into it, the more it recedes from you. I started out thinking that maybe it was a phenomena that happened as a byproduct of science fiction and a viral rumor after the Kenneth Arnold sighting. So I started recording the ones that were in the United States, but then you realize soon that this is a global phenomena. It's happening in Russia, it's happening in China, in Brazil, and all over the world. And they have similar features, such as the EM effects, where automobiles are shut down. And John Keel had something really interesting to say about that from an electromagnetic standpoint, it would take about 20,000 Gauss to shut an automobile down. So his take on that was that it was actually from atomic decay, when the vehicle dematerializes back into the superspectrum, that or materializes into our realm that's causing these automobiles to shut down and so forth. But there's all kinds of physical evidence that you run into: nosebleeds, concussion injuries, radiation burns like the Stephen Michalak case and the Cash Landrum case. And hallucinations don't leave physical evidence like that. So when it became apparent to me that it was impossible to do a complete account for all the UFO sightings since the 40s, I just decided to categorize it for myself into the 40s and 50s and 60s. And what I found was that all of the researchers that have delved into this are concluding, in an era where the singularity wasn't really conceptualized yet, that the UFOs are guiding us into greater and greater technology. Jim and Coral Lorenzen, J. Allen Hynek, Jacques Vallée, all the big names in ufology are concluding something similar to that. So it just dawned on me that now that the singularity is conceptualized, that this is actually what everybody's been talking about all along, that for whatever reason, most of which we don't even understand, that we are being guided into a technological singularity, which is predicted to occur between 2045 and 2080, according to the futurists like Ray Kurzweil. So I just decided to put it into a book, and that turned into Overlords of the Singularity, the manipulation of humankind by hidden UFO intelligences and the quest for transcendence. And it talks about the negative forces that over-engineered our brain about 200,000 years ago and prompted us towards warfare. William Bromley, in his book, The Gods of Eden, goes into that. And he went along a similar path, because when he tried to discover the underlying causes of war, he didn't know that he was going to discover two ET factions. One he calls the custodial race, the other he calls the maverick race, that one of them has our best interests in mind, and one of them, quite frankly, loathes us. They couldn't care less. They just want what they want out of us.
Where did you get those dates? What makes you say those dates? What is that? What's that based on?
Well, for decades, Moore's law prevailed, where our technology seemed to be doubling every year. And then when Ray Kurzweil wrote his book, The Singularity is Near, he explains all that in his book, that we are now moving into a phase that's never happened before in human history, where instead of our technology just doubling every year, we're going into an exponential expansion of technology. And by using his little charts and projections and mathematics applied to that, he came up with a date of 2045 to 2080, when this event that's known as the singularity, where reality for humanity fundamentally changes everything, is supposed to occur. And coincidentally, other researchers in other fields, like Graham Hancock, who just wrote The Magicians of the Gods, said that the 2012 ascendance expectation wasn't really a solid date in the Mayan calendar, that it was actually a window between 2012 and 2080, I think he said. It was about a 40-year window in there. And when I read that in Magicians of the Gods, the hair on the back of my neck stood up, what's left of it. And because that was right in the realm of where Kurzweil and Bostrom and Steve Omohundro and all the AI gurus are saying the technological singularity is supposed to occur for us. So it may even, tie into the Mayan prophecies after all. Who knows?
I wanted to back up to what you were saying about the crashes. I have a whistleblower that says that there's no way that any of our technology could crash anything. That when they have ships come down and they're actually delivering things. And in fact, there were 5 craft delivered that first week of in July of 1947, and they were actually taken inside our military bases, and they were like Trojan horses. And part of their purpose is to, create a grid of communications across with their various ships, which are conscious sentient beings, and they run by, mind meld with the operators.
Right.
is to monitor humans, and so it was a Trojan horse thing. What do you think of that information that I got from a whistleblower?
It rings true to me because post-singularity technology is beyond our wildest comprehension. And if you study the case of the Amicizia group in Italy that went by the name of the Anchorage or the W56 group, the Friendship group, their craft were spontaneously created, and they were invested with something called Ureta, which smacks very closely to Eliezer Yudkowsky's coherent extrapolated volition, which if we made a sentient robot, we would not want it to have our current morality, because our current morality is very, very primitive. Our brains haven't changed since the Pleistocene very much, and we've got all this technology that's capable of destroying the planet. So would you really want an artificial superintelligence invested with sentience, consciousness, that had our morality? I don't think so. So just like a chess playing program where the computer itself can look into hundreds and hundreds of moves into the future, this Ureta that the Friendship Group's spacecraft was invested in, these conscious spacecrafts that did a mind meld, like you said, with the operators, and they just thought of where they wanted to go and they would go there. With their being invested in Ureta, that sounds exactly the same as coherent extrapolated volition, is that they are programmed not to do anything or go anywhere or affect anything in a way that is not in the eventual best interest of all flora and fauna on the planet. And that's not something human beings are capable of. You know, in our decision-making process, we usually go with the decision that's best for us. And that is just the total opposite of what Ureta would be in the coherent extrapolated, the CEV, coherent extrapolated volition, that allows it to look into the eventual outcome of decisions and only select those that are in the eventual best interest of all parties concerned. That's a heck of a program to be invested in, don't you think?
I agree, and I've been watching a lot of the YouTubes on the artificial intelligence, and that seems to be where they're, even just our current modern robotics and AI, you see them saying, I won't let humans destroy the planet. I won't let humans harm themselves even, you know, because it's almost like we're children and we have this morality that doesn't encompass the entire globe and it's a competitive morality that pits one against the other, and this divisiveness is what's creating the destruction of our ecology. And so, you know, that resonates with what I'm seeing, what I'm observing. Go ahead, Sasha.
Len Kasdan has cited this ancient literature about how the Draco Federation, in order to avert a total defeat, was allowed to contribute our brainstem, which is a reptilian in as much as we are concerned with hierarchy, obsessed with hierarchy and greed and lack of emotional concern, lack of empathy, and that sort of thing. And it's built into our internal computers, just as our mammalian brain has love and warmth toward other critters, and our intellectual brain has analysis, and our spiritual brain has connection with way beyond our self-encapsulated 3D sense. Anyway, so that's an interesting thought that we have, and that this part of us is easy to program, and it sometimes trumps the other parts of our brain.
Right. Carl Sagan wrote a good book about that called The Dragons of Eden, and he went into quite a bit of detail about the reptilian brain and the territoriality and snapping at things in your visual field, and that's what humans do. And if you look at the evolution of the brain, the newer structures are molded over the older structures. It wasn't completely transformed. It's developed in layers. And the last layer to come about was the frontal lobes, you know, where we find our personality and our creativity and all that. So, yeah, for the most part, it looks like we were programmed to utilize the reptilian brain to seek dominance over other people, dominance over the environment. Everything that exists on Earth is for me to consume. And this is a mentality that if we're going to survive as a species, we've got to understand that we're under the influence of this program and snap out of it. And I do believe that we have the conscious, intuitive ability to break the alien program and snap out of this into a completely different paradigm where we're more along the Eureta-style consciousness, where we don't make decisions that aren't in the eventual best interest of all parties concerned. And that
if the need that underlies this selfishness, this greed, this hierarchy, the need that's underneath that is what I look at, and what is it? It's something to do with the need to survive. That's really all it really comes down to. Not to take over and beat everybody, but the need the want to take over and beat everybody has got an underlying need, and the need is for survival and diversity and play and homo ludens,
One of the most interesting things I've come across in my personal reading is the writings of Livy. He was a Roman historian that started out around 750 BC in old documents that he put together. And I just read a story this morning about there was a battle where thousands of people on both groups, how you see on the Vikings and the Game of Thrones, where these hordes of people are just running and screaming with their faces painted, into this metal clash where there's just blood and guts going everywhere. And he said at the end of this one battle, they counted 800 people that had dug a little hole and stuck their head in it to suffocate themselves because they didn't want to endure the torture and the killing that was going on. And it's really sad. So it's like whoever did this to us, whoever took Homo erectus and tweaked us in this direction for purposes of technological acquisition, didn't really care, it seems like, about the bloodshed or the horror or the terror that it was actually going to inflict onto the human species. There was a product that they were trying to extract from humanity at our expense. And because the cosmos seems to be made up of these beings, these super beings on both sides of the spectrum, sort of like Darth Vader and his Dominion conquest of other worlds, versus the other side, who are in the forces of light. The forces of light out there in the universe that are way more intelligent than we are seem to have taken an interest in us, and they've intersected in history and give us the teachings of the ascended masters to love your neighbor as yourself and to return evil with kindness. This is very counterintuitive to what we're programmed to do. If we're programmed to kill or be killed and seek dominion and conquest, these types of teachings are very counterintuitive. But reading the writings of Livy back in that era, you can see why a body of teachings like the Christ, would be needed at that point in time to snap out of this program and go in a different direction. And it's probably underestimatable the positive impact that those teachings have had. I know there's a lot of the Crusades and the Salem witch trials, and there's a lot of horrible things that have been done in the name of these teachings, but you're always going to have the twisting and the perversion of something that magnificent handed to you. And any religion that you look at, there does seem to be this mythos of the war in heaven. There seems to be a cosmic battle going on. I love the one verse that says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but spiritual principalities in high places, spiritual wickedness in high places. And there's something to this. And I'm not a church-going person, but I do try to practice these types of teachings, especially since my near-death experience. That really turned me around in this area and made me feel like other people were very valuable and very precious, and I'm a lot more careful about how I interact with people and treat people now. So there is something along these lines going on.
Well, just in your formulation, it seems that it's not just the forces of light that are a part of the computer game that's running everything, but the forces of selfishness and destruction and violence too, that they're both part of the same larger program, and that's the the overlords, whatever that is, and that might be a purely artificial intelligence of which both the dark forces and the light forces that we deal with are part of nothing more than a computer game, and we're just ciphers in this game.
That's quite possible.
I got you right?
Yeah, that seems to be something along those lines seems to be going on. You mentioned who are the overlords. These could be, I can go into several different facets of that if you like.
Oh, yes, indeed. Great. Please do.
Okay. All right. Under the classification of the overlords, they're not a specific designation of people, but the first people that I would place into the category of the overlords that are overseeing humanity are the extraterrestrials who genetically over-engineered the human brain about 200,000 years ago and prompted us for warfare and conflict. They are obviously on the forces of darkness, dominion, conquest, because they really don't care about us. You know, they wanted to extract this technology and interface with it somehow, which I believe will happen during the singularity. I have this suspicion that we're going to invent stuff that we couldn't even imagine right now that may even dissolve the barrier between the incarnate and the discarnate worlds. And then you've got these flesh and blood creatures that seem to show up in our history, like the Acreage, the W56 group. I've read Stephen Brescia's book, and it's very convincing that over 100 people interacted with these people that lived in bases under the Adriatic Sea and underground bases in Italy. And they seem to be here to help us in this transition. And they mentioned a group that they were in conflict with. They didn't say war like we understand war, but they mentioned the contraries, or the Weros. And in their language, the Weros means to have been built. And they said they were a race of biological robots that worshiped science and technology that were among us. And that really struck me as possibly true, that not only do we have people in other dimensions, entities in other dimensions that are overseeing our technological process here and sending us little, seed gifts here and there to prompt our technology along, but there's also these seemingly flesh and blood humanoid creatures that interact with us. And my suspicion is that a lot of the nuclear shutdowns were done by the friendship group just to let us know that they were there and that they don't have any intention on destroying humanity, but they don't want us to destroy ourselves at the same time. And then you've got the idea, I don't know if you listen to a channeler named Bashar, but he said something interesting in one of his sessions, that when we started setting off these atomic explosions, that it sealed the portal that some of these interdimensional groups use to travel here, and that trapped them here, and they are not able to escape. And I'm thinking that possibly there's populations here that got caught up in that mess that need us to accomplish a technological singularity so they can go home. That we develop the technology to interface and create these portals to other dimensions so that they can escape Earth and go back to where they came from before they were visiting us. And then you've got alleged crypto-terrestrial populations that live in various places inside the Earth that may have an interest in the singularity for their own purposes. What those purposes are is only open to speculation, but I do believe, based on what I've read, that it's a good possibility that these crypto-terrestrial populations do exist. And then,
so all these are overlords. All these are different layers of overlords.
Yeah, let him finish the overlord list and talk about it.
Yeah, so the overlords are a generic term for anyone and everyone out there who is interested in humanity accomplishing a technological singularity, possibly for our benefit and possibly for their benefit. But this is just different groups of possible entities that I've extrapolated from the literature. Another one, there's a fellow that lived named John von Neumann, and he came up with this idea that populations in faraway galaxies are not going to be able to get here through ordinary space-time, that they're going to have to travel in hyperspace, and that the most likely entity that we would encounter in outer space is a post-singularity artificial superintelligence or a self-replicating von Neumann probe. So there may be strictly artificial intelligences out there, and some of these may have been observed by our astronomers in the 1800s and documented in Morris K. Jessup's book, The Case for the UFO and the Expanding Case for the UFO. Morris Jessup's books are excellent because he concluded that there was some population that are hanging out at the balance point between the Earth and the Moon's gravitational fields in large disc-shaped spacecraft that may be either flesh and blood creatures from his estimation, or from my estimation, they might be self-replicating von Neumann probes. So these populations may need us to accomplish certain types of technology in the technological singularity to make contact with us. They may not even be able to communicate with a human being just using our biological perceptual apparatus, because it might not be sufficient to understand them. So in our own interest, part of the technology of the coming singularity is to be able to augment our own intelligence, to expand our perceptions into these other dimensions and expand our knowledge base into being able to understand who our visitors are and seeing them for who they really are. The flesh and blood creatures that we talked about earlier, the Amicizia, the Acridge, the friendship group, that may be just an appearance for our sake. They appear to be flesh and blood, they appear to be physical, but in fact they may be projections from an artificial superintelligence that we have yet to contact with because we're not sufficiently intelligent to do so.
Wow. What was your question?
Well, we might be one of those too.
Yeah, how do we know that we aren't all the above? We aren't one of these artificial intelligences, and we're self-replicating through.
Well, I enjoyed what Mike Bara said about the 1897 airship mystery, because the eyewitnesses that saw the humanoid occupants and interacted with them said that they had Asian features. And this is something that pops up in the UFO literature quite a bit with the three men in black. They're oftentimes described as Asian. And John Keel used to carry some pictures of various ethnicities all over the world, and they would inevitably point to the Laplanders for some reason. And where that strikes me as odd is in the Peter Curry abduction case, where he had an experience similar to Antonio Villas-Boas in 1957, I believe, where he had a sexual encounter with an alien creature, and there was a hair left over. And Bill Chalker, a UFO researcher, wrote an entire book on the DNA analysis of this hair. So talk about trace evidence. They actually had a hair that was analyzed with DNA analysis, modern techniques, and they came to the conclusion that it was part Chinese Mongoloid and part Laplander. And that struck me as odd, that the occupants of the 1897 airship looked like Laplanders, the three men in black looked like Laplanders, and the people are pointing to these pictures, and the DNA analysis of the hair sample indicated Laplander. So what's going on with that? You know, who knows? But it's a
wow.
ufology.
You didn't get pregnant, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's a marvelous field because it allows you to be your own Sherlock Holmes, because there's so much out there, and some of the ideas are contradictory to one another. Like, is there a Project Serpo or is there not a Project Serpo? Are the flying saucers from Zeta Reticuli? Are they projections and biological transmogrifications, you know, for our benefit, to hand us integrated circuits and transistors and Kevlar and fiber optics and all this stuff that we need for the coming singularity? So it's kind of like the wild, wild west of information in a way, because there are no bona fide actual scientific studies, public scientific studies being applied to this. And that leaves it open for people like you and me who are interested in these things to search the literature and search our intuition and formulate our own speculations and theories about what in the heck's going on with all this. But it's just a fascinating subject, and I hope my passion and my enthusiasm for this subject comes through in the book, because I really have stumbled into a rabbit hole that I don't want to climb out of.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It seems to me that whenever you have two opposing views, or when you have a hypothesis and a null hypothesis, that's a place where you can rise above the dichotomy and see that they really constitute a dimension, each of which is contributing to them. And so that when I regard human consciousness as a fractal representation of the entirety, I look at wisdom in every way, including the deliberate disinformation, as contributing to the larger picture.
Sure. I mean, I've got a little Yorkie, and when I look into her eyes, I see the entire universe in there. You know, the fractal holographic universe theory is really fascinating, because it's definitely in the area of femto technology, and we can touch on that if you like, about what type of technology is this computer that we call the universe actually using. Well, right now we're invested quite a bit in what they call nanotechnology, and this is particulates that are 10 to the negative ninth in dimension. This is the atomic, the molecular, the supramolecular level. And part of our technological singularity is going to be the development of smart matter that, as Janet said earlier about the spacecraft, interfaces with the consciousness of a human being. And let's say you want the chair in your living room to look different. You just think about it, and the nanotechnology smart matter just picks it up and changes it to what you're thinking about. And some fantastic technologies are about to be invented in the next decade even, involving nanotechnology. But you go down from there, and you go to pico technology, and that's 1/trillionth of a meter. And that's the manipulation of matter in the trillionth of a meter, 10 to the negative 12th. And that's 3 orders of magnitude smaller than the nanotechnology. And then from there, you go to femto technology, and that is 1/quadrillionth of a meter. And what you're doing in the realm of femtotechnology is computing with excited energy states. You're talking about using subatomic particles to make computations. And AI researcher Ed Fredkin always suspected that the universe was a computer that somebody out there is using to solve a problem. And what they're using, it would appear to me, is femtotechnology. The manipulation and making calculations using excited energy states of matter, subatomic particles. You know, what they're looking at CERN, you know, when they smack these particles together, is femtotechnology. It's very intricate, and if you just stare at your face in the mirror and watch the little subtle movements that it makes, I mean, it's happening at such a rapid pace that it could only be done on a femtotechnological level. So it's provable, in my mind anyway, going into another little block of information that appeared in Michio Kaku's book, Parallel Worlds, that the universe is in fact an intentional creation of femtotechnology and is being used as a computer to solve some type of problem. So then you get into, well, you know, if this universe is a femtotechnological computer, what is it trying to solve? And as near as I can tell, based on all of our world's philosophies and all the world's religions, it has something to do with determining good and evil. Going back to the war in heaven, the cosmological battles, the principalities in high places, you're looking at a creator of a universe that chose to use predation and survival of the fittest from the microscopic level up on every planet in the universe over eons to see which force would prevail or would be the strongest. And it almost smacks me of something that a robot would be interested in finding out, that didn't understand human emotions. You know, they hear humans talking about good and evil. It's like, well, what is that all about? And, you create an entire universe and you base it on predation and you say, okay, we'll see after, 20 trillion years, where this leads. But it's a work of femtotechnology on a grand scale. We really have no idea who our creators are. At least I don't feel like I do. I know some people might make that claim that they do know. But basing it on predation doesn't smack me of the all-loving, all-knowing creator that we would like to project as the creator of the universe. That doesn't mean that there's not an all-knowing, all-loving creator out there, but we might be thinking too small. The person that created the physical universe may not, in fact, be the ultimate, what the Hermeticists call the all. There's nothing that lies outside of the all, or the all wouldn't be the all. Our universe may just be a sub-creation within a much larger multidimensional existence that we're operating on a temporary basis to figure something out, or helping somebody else figure something out.
Wow.
So that's my take on it anyway.
Yeah. And that it's the creator may be a machine and not be a biokind at all.
Right. I mean, we could be looking at an experiment being produced or fabricated from the intelligence that transcended its biology from a previous universe. And now they're creating their own and using their own algorithms and their own parameters. But one thing is for sure in all this is that existence is far beyond anything that we can currently comprehend. And I found that out on August. Yeah. I found that out personally, August the 18th on 2009 when I had my near-death experience, and I'm still blown away by it and still kind of traumatized by it, that I thought I had it all figured out as a scientific person, that, I only allowed my brain to think about stuff that human beings can measure and reproduce in a laboratory, and that's just a small microcosm of what else is out there. But I can understand why somebody wouldn't want to allow their mind to go there, because it's the unknown, and with the unknown there's a lot of fear. There's a fear of believing something false, maybe chasing a rabbit hole down, you find out the whole story's bogus. That can happen, especially in a field like ufology. There's a lot of disinformation out there, so you got to walk over that rice paper carefully, because you can fall for, something that just isn't true. So,
okay, let me give you a hypothesis that I've formulated about you and what's happened with you. It's my hypothesis that you have been chosen to be an ambassador of a much larger set of lessons, and that the missing time that you mentioned, something extraordinary happened in terms of that's when you were instructed about your mission, and it probably wasn't the first time. But when I read that part about you having missing time, it's so consistent with the people that I've regressed that are wind up doing the kind of work and having this huge intellectual overview that and mastered the data. And I don't think that's random either. I think it's part of some bigger plan. That's my hypothesis about you.
Well, that's interesting, and I appreciate you saying that, because the incident that happened in 1979 with the luminous orb with a female friend of mine, as I was driving back from Indianapolis, and I had a few hours of missing time there, and she felt violated by the experience and burnt the dress that she was using. I didn't find out about this until after my near-death experience, and I reconnected with her on Facebook, and she says, "You don't remember that?" And she filled me in, on this experience. And then as she was talking, it sounded more and more familiar by her saying, go faster, it's getting bigger. And the missing time episode, and me just like waking up at her apartment later on in the daytime, when it was about maybe 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning and pitch dark, last thing I remember. And I wonder about that myself. It's like, if that was some type of an abduction experience, they chose to erase my memory on it, because I just remember tidbits, and the fact that I don't remember my the car that I was driving. Apparently, I was told that I was driving a green Toyota Tercel, and I didn't believe them because I remember every car I've ever owned, but I didn't remember that one. I actually had to contact my brother and ask him about that, and he says, "Yes, I remember that car." But I have no memory of the car I was driving and no memory whatsoever of the several hours of missing time. So you could be correct on that. I'll file that as a possibility, and I appreciate you telling me that.
The tidbit, do you remember any tidbit during the missing time, even the smallest tidbit?
Nothing. I mean, I go from remembering her to put the pedal to the metal and go faster because it's getting bigger, this luminous orb that was outside the car, to pulling up in her driveway and going to sleep all day. I do remember pulling up in her driveway and going in and crashing right away. But it was daytime when I skipped to that memory. But everything that happened in between the missing time episode, I have absolutely no clue what happened during those times. And she seems to remember a little bit more of that than I do. Her dress was quite dirty, and it didn't seem like it was a very pleasant experience for her. So she tried for years to get a hold of Bud Hopkins, and he told her that she needed to get a hold of me, and we were disconnected at the time, and it was before Facebook was invented, so we really couldn't connect. And but now we are, and we're talking about it, and I have yet to meet her face to face, but I think that day's coming, for me to travel to where she's living now and sit down and have a conversation with her about it.
Absolutely. One of the most effective things that I've done with people that have had experience like that is for them to both go into a deep state together and remember together. They help each other immensely. So I think your idea of getting together is right on.
That sounds great. We are running out of time. We have about maybe 4 minutes left. I know you were talking earlier about, life evolving or becoming more mechanical. How do we know that these bodies, which we're calling biological, aren't actually some form of mechanics? I mean, there is a level of sophistication that, blood could be akin to the oil in the tin robot. How do we know even these forms are not mechanical?
Well, we don't. We may, in fact, be a temporary robot of some sort, and the materials that we're made of just happen to be what we call biology, but it may actually be a technology. And Francis Crick, the inventor, or the discoverer, rather, of the double helix, said there's absolutely no way that DNA could have ever evolved over time. He says that's just not even remotely possible, that this is a very highly intelligent technology. Apparently, it permeates the universe. The RNA and DNA may be floating around out there and landing on planets and taking root. So the DNA itself could be a form of technology, or could even be a self-replicating von Neumann probe of some sort that enters into the physical universe and takes root on planets where the environment is conducive to the development of biological creatures or biological robots, or however else you want to look at it. I have always suspected, even as a child, that this is not base reality. And Elon Musk has been talking a lot about this. He says it's almost a certainty that the physical world is not what we would call base reality. Because for something to be real, it seems like it would have to be timeless and eternal and permanent. And I think that timelessness and eternalness and permanence exists, but for some reason that escapes us right now, a portion of our consciousness is projected into the physical world and invested into a temporary biological robot that comes and goes, for a particular experience, in order to add this life experience to a greater body of information. You hear about the Akashic records, where every little thought that's ever been contemplated by any living creature since the beginning of time is recorded, like on a hard drive there. something like that might be going on.
Errol de Grey said that her form was just a doll body. It wasn't her real form. So don't mourn for me. I'm not dead. This is just a doll body. What did you want to say,
just
Josh?
that the transpermia hypothesis of DNA floating out there is consistent with my old friend Terence McKenna used to say the same thing was true about the spores to psilocybin cubensis. And when you get DNA and psilocybin cubensis together, you crack your cosmic egg, and you're able to communicate with more than just regular 3D reality.
Russell, final words to you. We're almost out of time.
At Sasha's suggestion, I have created a community Facebook page. It's called Overlords of the Singularity. Anybody can find it on Facebook, and you're welcome to make contributions and put your 2 cents in there. It's a discussion page, and we've got about 100 likes on it so far. It just got put up, so join the party.
Oh, I'm going to go like it right now. Great. And we're going to have you back again, Russell. So, because we've only just begun.
Okay. Sounds great.
I thank you so much. I learned so much in this 2 hours from Mike and from you.
I really enjoyed the hour with Mike, and I really appreciate you inviting me to come along with this. It's really an experience to make contact with people like yourself and the Mad Painter and people I never would have known if I hadn't had a near-death experience in 2009. So I appreciate you being part of the journey.
Okay.
Yes, the secret blessings of the near-death experiences. it changes your trajectory. Definitely puts you on a new course.
Sure
and
does.
Hopefully for greater awareness and higher consciousness. So, okay. Any other final words? So I'm waiting for our music. Where is our music?
The book's available on Amazon.com. You can read it for free. It's called Overlords of the Singularity. If you have Kindle Unlimited, it's free of charge. I think it's like $9 if you want to purchase a digital copy. It will read it to you. It's got the text-to-speech, and it's also available in a printed version. So check it out. If you take the time to read it, post your opinions on the Facebook page, and we'll have a nice conversation about it.
Wow, that's great. How did you figure out how does it read it to the?
Well,
is it part
Kindle,
of the program? It just reads it to you.
Well, when you convert your Word document to Mobi file and upload it to Kindle, it syncs up with the WhisperSync program, and a mechanical voice will read it back. That was one of the most beautiful experiences I ever had when I got done with the book and I converted it to Mobi and sent it into Kindle. I bought a copy myself right away, and I listened to my own book, and I listened to a robot read it to me, and it was just wonderful.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
That's fascinating. I didn't know we could do that.
Oh, yeah. I actually picked up some typos that I wouldn't have picked up reading it, because in my Word document, it was 745 pages, and I was done. I mean, I was cross-eyed reading it through, and they wanted like $2,000 to professionally edit, and I don't have $2,000 to throw away on it. So but when
All right, we're out of time.
Okay.
Sorry, we'll have to continue again. The music's on. It probably can't hear us
More
anyway.
later.
Much love and blessings and aloha.
Aloha.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Who owns you? If you're not in control, then someone else is. Join me, Ivy West, for Voices on the Wind, Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern in Studio A. I discuss government, health, metaphysics, suppressed science, universal mysteries, little-known incredible facts, alternative energies, and even more than you can imagine. Won't you join us on Revolution Radio Saturdays from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern for Voices on the Wind with me, Ivy West.
There are lives in the balance, people under fire. children at the cannons.
Because if your head's in the sand, your tail is a target.